Hello and welcome to another episode of Atomic Vinyl Reviews. And today we're going to be taking a look at the Papo T-rex figure, the green variant in particular. Now, I'm going to kind of go over my kind of background with this figure. So, with the release of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, I've kind of gotten into a bit of a Jurassic Park dinosaurs kind of nostalgia mood again, and so I decided to pick up this figure. And I actually just went on eBay and I picked up the cheapest Papo T-rex I could find. It just had a stock image of the brown variant, because just going I'll go over into some background about Papo figures and this figure in particular, but basically what you need to know is that there are two variants of the T-rex. The first one that came out is this green one. Now this green one, I'll just look at the date here. This one came out in 2005. Since then, this one has gone out of production and has become actually pretty rare and goes for quite high prices these days. And it's been replaced with a brown variant, which what you'll find out later is almost all just a paint difference, except for sculpt differences in the face. And I actually owned the brown variant in the past, and I ended up selling that one off not that long ago, maybe a year ago or something like that. And yeah, then with the sort of nostalgia of the Jurassic World stuff and the Jurassic Park stuff, I kind of felt like picking this one up. And I did not know it was going to be the green variant. Now, the interesting thing is, actually, so actually, before I get into that, I'll just go over Papo. So Papo is a French company, I believe, that make various natural history figures, not just dinosaurs, but animals and like medieval knights and all sorts of stuff like that. But their dinosaur figures in particular are renowned for very, very good details, and for being actually very accurate, some of them, to the dinosaurs in the Jurassic Park films, and much better quality than those of the actual official Jurassic Park toys, apart from, like, you know, the very high-end figures and, you know, the models and whatnot. But just the actual, in this price range, the Papo ones are miles and kilometers ahead of the official Jurassic Park toys. So I owned the brown variant of this figure, and I'll cut to some photos of that in a sec, because like I said, I sold that one, so I don't have it on hand. But I decided to make this video because what struck me when I basically so I ordered this figure. It had a blank, like, it just had a bland stock image of the brown T-rex as the photo on eBay. It said it was second hand, so I was expecting some wear on it, and this one does have some wear. Like, the tip of the tail is actually broken off here, and there's some minor, like, paint wear, like up here on the top of his head, and, you know, a couple little places on the tips of the nails, stuff like that. However, what struck me when I opened up the package was, immediately I looked at the T-rex and thought, this looks so much better than the one I had before. It was just something about the paintwork, something about the expression on the face, and with closer inspection, because the interesting thing was, and this is why I made this video, I didn't know, like, immediately looking at it, it wasn't apparent that this was the green variant. Because on film and in a lot of photos, it looks pretty green, but in person, especially with the lighting that I had when I first opened it up, and still looking at it now in person, it's not noticeably green. Like, if I didn't know better, and if I didn't have the context that of the various features that you'd find with the green T-rex, I would have no idea that this one wasn't the brown one, and that I didn't have a slightly rarer figure, which is I'm really glad I ended up picking this specific listing, because yeah, I really wanted the green variant. Because, and I'll get into it for a few reasons, this one is far better, I'd say, than the brown one, and far more accurate to the Jurassic Park T-Rex. Another thing is, because this one has a slight greenish tinge, which again, like I say, in person it looks more of sort of a browny gray beige color, with maybe touches of a little bit of a green tinge to it, but not very noticeable. But because of that, people say that this one is more reminiscent of the T-Rex that appears in The Lost World, because those ones were slightly green, even though, I don't know, in the film they didn't really look all that green to me either. But yeah, the moment I took this out of the box, I looked at it and it really struck me as being far more like the ones from Jurassic Park than the brown variant, which they say looks more like the one from the first film, because that one was very brown. And I completely disagree. This one, even though it's slightly more green, still looks closer to the one from the first film and the one from the second film compared to the brown variant, because aside from just a slight difference in the paint job, where the brown one is much darker and, you know, more brown, and has sort of different variations in how the paint is applied, really, like on the face here, like when you see how it's lighter in this spot here and some of those details, in the paint job of the brown one, that's very different. Also, the paint in the eyes is very different on the brown variant. Here in the eyes, they fill them fully with that yellow gold paint. It's actually gold. I'll zoom in and give you a proper close-up of it later. But the brown variant has little smaller eyes, so less paint on the eyes, and the yellow, and they look much smaller, whereas the T-Rex in the Jurassic Park series had rather large eyes. They're actually a little bigger than this too, but this is much closer, and it has that almond shape, more almond-like shape than the purely round eyes of the brown variant. So unfortunately I don't have that one to show you, but I'm gonna cut to an image of that one now and some comparison images, and then I'm gonna cut to a nice close-up of this creature so you can have a look at it. But actually, just before I'll do that, I'll sort of spin it around. I'll spin it around for you guys so you can have a look at it in all its glory. I'm not sure if the color is going to be exactly the same on camera as it is in person. I think it's coming out a little bit darker because I was having some trouble adjusting the white balance to not be, you know, too bright and all that sort of stuff. But I'm going to show you those images, and then we're going to cut to a close-up of it, and you'll see some of the big differences, because they actually did some sculpt differences in the face, which is really disappointing with the brown version, I'd say. I mean, that one's still a beautiful figure, because these Papo figures are really well done, and I'll show you some more of those in the size comparison later. But yeah, another cool feature of these Papo figures is they actually have articulated mouths, most of the dinosaurs, and that's done really nicely here. Actually, I prefer to have him pose with the mouth closed, because he kind of has, the snout gets a little thinner towards the front and has that sort of bulkier bit here. But when you open it up, the whole bottom jaw seems a bit too thick, at least the front section, compared to how it looked in the movie. But he does have a nice range of articulation there, and the rest of this figure is actually solid, like a solid, slightly rubberized plastic. So he's very hefty. He's a pretty big figure. I mean, you can see my hand next to him. I have pretty big hands, but you can just get the general idea. So I'm gonna cut to the images of the brown variant, as well as some images that people have stolen these offline. So if these are your images by any chance, I'm really sorry for stealing your photos. Please don't be too sad. But yeah, so you'll get to see some comparisons, and I'm gonna go through and I'll change the camera angle, and you'll be able to see very close up the details. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed looking at that little comparison of the images of this guy and the brown variant. You could see the brown variant compared to this one, just it lacks sort of that, like I threw in a couple of photos of the actual Jurassic Park T-rex in there, just so you can see them sort of side by side and see the personality and the look of the actual T-rex that we got in the movie compared to those two figures. But you can see here, I've got like an extreme close-up now of the figure, and you can really see that detail. This thing is, the sculpt is just done beautifully. Every scale is individually sculpted. Very careful attention was put into making this thing look the best it can. Another interesting thing to note is this thing is, these ones are hand painted, so each one will look slightly different, I believe, just in the way they do these. But yeah, so open up his jaw. You can get a good look at this guy. So before I go into looking at the specific details that they changed in the sculpt, I'm just going to give you an overall look at the whole creature. Now again, I'm filming this with natural light, and it's got kind of dark outside. It's pretty rainy looking at the moment, so the lighting is not coming through as well as I would like. The colors. He's probably a little more saturated. He has a little bit more, at least on my screen. My screen might be different to what you're getting, but he's got a little bit more green, a little bit more yellows, a little bit brighter in saturation in person than what's coming out on film, but not too dissimilar. He's got very nice sort of pretty neutral tones to him, and his eyes, being that gold color, which was not on the brown variant, really does make them pop and make them come out nicely. He's these nice ridges here, which really resemble that in the Jurassic Park T-rex. And just that image right there really resembles the one we saw in the movie. And what's funny is actually we get this little copyright information right here that you know, Papo made in China, that sort of stuff. But weirdly enough, on this side, it's kind of like, it looks like they were originally going to put it there, and there's like kind of an imprint of that and like a smoother texture. I don't know what's up with that, because I don't think that's been on any of my other Papo figures, so that's just pretty odd. But you can see there's this nice texture on his stomach. What I like about these Papo figures that they do, and they do this a little bit more on the Spinosaurus figure, which I'll probably do a review of that in the future because I have that one, is where in the scales, they'll put like a wash of a darker color when the light scales on the belly, like in between the different scales, and on the darker scales, like on the face in some areas, what they do is they put a light wash, so it's lighter in between the scales, and it looks like there's sort of that slightly softer flesh in between each hard scale, and they really the mixing of those two methods really helps some of these details pop out. You can see he's got those stripes that we see going down his body, just very lightly dry brushed on, but they show through really nicely, and they just really remind you of the creature from the movie. And there you can see the tail of mine is a little bit broken, but I don't really mind that too much, considering that this is, you know, a really nice, really rare figure, and just beautifully detailed. Lovely scaling on this side. And you can see his feet there have that classic bird-like look, and his nails are nicely detailed too. They kind of are dark gray with like a wash of a lighter gray over the top, and they kind of look, in person, they look like they're made of graphite. They have that sort of matte, almost metallic look to them. It sort of looks like, you know, dark bone or graphite or something like that. Very natural looking. A little bit of texture under the feet is a standard thing with these figures. It looks really nice. And overall, down to almost every detail, this thing is very close to the creature we saw in the Jurassic Park movies. Overall, though I know it's not in focus, but you can see the pose here. Overall, I find this pose, even though it's based off the pose at the end of the first Jurassic Park, where the creature is, you know, standing and roaring at the end, and then the banner falls down. At the very last scene that we see of this guy in the film Jurassic Park, even though it's based off that, I find the pose a little bit blocky. I would have liked to have seen a version of this guy where he's standing straight, like he's running after the Jeep or something like that. That would have been a really cool pose to have this sculpt in. They did make a running T-Rex, another sculpt of a T-Rex in the Papo line. However, that one does not resemble the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. It more closely resembles the V-Rex from the 2005 Peter Jackson's King Kong film, which I really like the ones in that one, but looking at that Papo figure, it just looks, I've never seen that one in person, but from the photos it looks less effective than this one. But I would have really liked to have seen this one in a different pose, because the tail looks a little short and it looks a little awkward standing in you know, this pose where his tail is touching the ground and it looks really short bent like this. I would have liked to have seen him stretched out a bit longer, because, you know, his legs are pretty well knelt down, and it makes him look a bit smaller than he really could. I mean, she really could. The T-Rex from Jurassic Park, at least the first one, was a female. And yeah, again, I like the look with the mouth closed. That really resembles, right there when you have her angled a bit forward like that, really resembles the snout of the one from the movie. And we got those beautiful teeth coming through here. So now I'm going to talk about the just look at the details down on the neck here. Actually, I'm just sort of looking at this closely. It's really easy to gush over some of these details. They're very beautifully done. But yeah, now I'm going to go over some of the differences that this one has in terms of sculpt to the brown variant. And again, like, go back and look at those images, or just Google it up, and there'll be some comparison images. But one of the main differences, first off, in the sculpt, is that the green variant has, this is the only thing that I think the brown one does better than the green one, is the green one has these really more rounded teeth. They're less sharp and some of mine looks like that somebody tried to play with this and like it bit down on something and left these a little smushed, unfortunately. Again, it's secondhand. But this one has much more rounded teeth. The brown variant has slightly a slightly sharper looking semi-sharp sculpt. Also, the paint on the teeth looks kind of thick and globby, so it doesn't. I wish they would have put some sort of a wash on them, or a dry brushing, or just like just to give them a more natural looking color, because these look compared to how hyper detailed this figure is, the teeth really stand out as being a little fake looking, like a bit cheap looking, which is unfortunate because you can see how much sharp detail they captured in the rest of the body. So I really don't know what's up with that, but that's just the way they made this figure, and I don't overall it doesn't ruin my overall feeling of this figure, because this one really is a fantastic little T-Rex. But that's one of the first differences. I'm not sure if they changed anything in the mouth, like the tongue or anything like that. I think that's all pretty much the same. You can see there's a couple little paint spots here from the white of the teeth, the sort of bone white, but that's no big deal. The next thing that they did is the jawline here. See how it, especially if you have the jaw closed, it has a very broad area at the back of its bottom jaw here, very nice and rounded. On the brown variant, they reduced this, which when its mouth is closed, I think it looked good on the brown variant, but especially when the mouth is open, seeing as how the only sort of issue I have with the sculpt, apart from the pose, is that this area of the jaw is still a little bit thick and doesn't taper off the same way it did in the Jurassic Park movie. It leaves it needs this thicker bit to have slightly more of a taper here, so when it's open it looks a lot better with the thicker area here. When it's closed it just looks fine, but they got rid of some of this mass on the brown variant, and yeah, like I said, this one looks a lot better with it, and is one of the reasons that when I took it out of the box when I got this thing, that I immediately looked at it and went, wow, this thing looks a lot better than the one I had. And like I said, the difference is in the eyes, but that's really more of the paint than the sculpt, but that gold really does look good. And another area is this little, I don't know what to call it, like the ear would be here. It's just this bit above the ear at the back of the skull. This is a little, it pokes out a little more on this sculpt. It was reduced on the brown variant, so you can see it there. It also helps to sort of widen the back of the head a bit. And the front, I don't know for certain if this is a sculpt difference, because in some comparisons they don't mention it, but I think the top of the snout here might be a little rounder on this one, a little more pronounced than on the brown variant. So again, the main difference is this T-Rex sort of has more personality and has more of a dynamic shape to the sculpt, whereas I find the brown one is a little more blocky and a little more generic looking. And off the top of my head, I think those are the only sculpt differences, but to me they make a big difference, and it's a real shame that they don't produce this figure anymore. So if you are able to find this one for a similar price to the brown variant, I'd definitely go for it, because this one goes for a lot more if you find it listed as the green variant. So I was super lucky to pick this one up, and I'm really happy to have this figure. So yeah, that's pretty much my review of this guy. I highly recommend her. I highly recommend her. Beautiful figure. Overall, I highly recommend looking at all of Papo's figures. Really, they're really well done. Just before I cut off, I'll do a size comparison of a couple of Papo figures, all the ones that I have, as well as some Godzilla figures and other stuff that I just have lying around, to give you guys a rough look at how big this thing is. So here she is next to the Papo Spinosaurus. Another really fantastic figure that if you're a fan of Jurassic Park movies, you can't go better than the Papo Spinosaurus. Color-wise, it's not doesn't match the film exactly, but the paint on it is pretty much the best I've seen of a dinosaur figure. They really got the scales down on this one. But again, I'm not going to get into that because I'm going to probably do a review of this one day. So just you'll see that in another video. But here's how they size up. A T-Rex is taller, but this one's kind of longer and looks pretty big because it has that big sail. Very good figure, and you can see how Papo's actually arrive, because I've never taken the stuff off of this one. I've kept it like it's new. It's got a little warning booklet or whatever, and Papo figures new, they come with these little tags, and they actually come in plastic bags, much like Bandai vinyls when you buy them, except for instead of having like the big cardboard tag like Bandai vinyls do, or Godzilla figures or Ultraman figures, they come with, you know, these little things. There you go, that's how they size up. They also both have opening and closing jaws. And you can recreate the scene from Jurassic Park 3 where these two fight, except for T-Rex is a bit bigger than the slightly smaller one we saw in that film. So this one would be more like the size of the T-Rex from the first Jurassic Park, which was probably, I think it's the biggest T-Rex canonically in the series, is Rexy from Jurassic Park 1. And the one from Jurassic Park 3 was canonically the smallest, apart from the baby T-Rex from Lost World. So, another Papo figure that I own, it's the only other one that I own, is the Jurassic Park 3 style Velociraptor. Again, a beautiful sculpt on this guy. Actually, I'm not too fond of the paint work in some areas of this figure, particularly these white patterns. I wish I would have the original brown variant, or they have a green variant now, to probably matches something like the color of this one, which looks a lot more like they did in the first Jurassic Park film. This one also has the red eyes from number 3. But they do look nice together, although nowhere near in scale. The Velociraptor is way too big, way too big. But oops, this one also has trouble standing, but you can kind of see them together. And yeah, so those are my Papo figures. So now I'm just gonna put a couple of Godzilla figures next to this thing. One that I've recently reviewed is the Godzilla 2002 SH Monsterarts figure. Beautiful figure. If you're into Godzilla figures, I highly recommend picking this one up, or any of the Godzillas in the Monsterarts line, really. Yeah, and you can see the Papo figure is a pretty bulky figure. Not huge, but you know, compared to some of those Monsterarts figures, he really has a nice bulk to him, and very heavy, because these ones are articulated and hollow, pretty much, so you can just see them next to each other. And keeping with the Monsterarts theme, I'll just bring in one more Monsterarts Godzilla. We'll have Burning Godzilla this time, because he hasn't appeared in a review in a while. Again, this is one of my favorite versions of Godzilla, next to one of my favorite versions of T-Rex. So, definitely not in scale. If you'd have a Godzilla that would be in scale with this T-Rex, the Godzilla would probably be about, I don't know, 1.5 meters tall, something like that, at the very least, maybe 2 or 3 meters high, compared to this little figure, which is like, I don't know, 15 to 16 or 17 centimeters at most high. I think it's like 15 centimeters tall. So yeah, no comparison, but just to give you an idea of size. And this, if you're not familiar with any of those figures, you will be familiar with Funko Pop vinyls. They're all pretty much the standard size unless you have one of the giant ones. So here he is next to a Lemmy figure. Lemmy, the bassist and singer of Motorhead, for those of you who don't know. And there you go. So that's my size comparison of this guy done. Normally I do a fancy size comparison with background music playing, and I bring in one of my pet cockatiels to stand next to this thing. But I'm just doing a really quick video of this thing, so I'm not going to do that this time, but in my future reviews they'll be back, so don't worry. But yeah, overall I'm really happy I was able to pick up this variant. I'm not sure if I can recommend the brown one. It like really depends. Like you really have to just look at the photos yourself. But this is just a video about the green one in particular, saying that if you're able to pick this one up for a good price, if you find somebody has this one, then go for it. So hopefully this video let you know what to look for to know the difference between the brown one and this one, because it's not always obvious. Like I said, when I first got it, something about it just looked right, but I needed to take my time and look at it a little longer and then see like the comparison photos to really know the difference, because there was an immediate difference that the paint was different, but I couldn't tell it was green necessarily, is the main thing initially. So something to keep in mind. And yeah, that's about it for this video. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I hope you check out some other videos on my channel. Like, subscribe, and all that jazz. I'd really appreciate that. And yeah, may all your vinyl be irradiated vinyl. Over and out.